What's up, people? Chef here again today to talk to you about the problem with Fear the Walking Dead Season 2. Let's just jump right into this. So, the problem with Season 2 is that, once again, the only character that we actually care about is Daniel. In fact, we actively care about some of these characters less than we did in Season 1 because it actually goes out of its way to make our characters unlikable as opposed to boring. Um, you know, so you have a bunch of like little things happening at first with a bunch of mystery about Strand and what's his game, what's he trying to do, what's the whole like point of this, what's going on, you know. Um and that's one of the big initial cruxes. But the problem is we don't really care about Strand to the point that there's this moment when he's like on a raft being set out, and I was just like, good riddance, because I didn't trust him, you know. Now, I mentioned Strand here because Strand actually is the only character that comes out of this season being in any way likable, or interesting in any way. After later on the revelation of his relationship with, I want to say Thomas was his name. I forget, but like Thomas, right? And and then later on, him and Madison having some moments between themselves, drinking, and I grew to actually sort of care about Strand. So good job, you gave me a second character that I care about, you know. That's what season two really did. Now, the other characters, Alicia comes out of this looking way worse because she caused a bunch of problems. You've got Nick, who kind of gets some interesting stuff towards the end, where I'm sort of starting to feel a bit more for him, and I'm starting to care a bit for him, but I'm not quite there yet. So it's doing a better job of getting me to like some of the characters, namely Nick and Strand. Now, I just despise Chris from the onset. In season one, I disliked him. When in season two, oh my god, does he become completely and utterly unbearable to watch. The writing of his character is dog shit, and his acting is even worse. And I just don't care. I was glad that some of the storylines ended really quickly, but then they get to the farm. They get to Not Herschel's farm, where Not Herschel rules the farm, and Not Herschel believes that the dead shouldn't be killed, and Not Herschel is locking them up in her not barn. Why are we reusing this plot point? What is the reason for reusing this plot point? You're going to spend a significant portion of this season on a farm with the same sort of plot as season 2 of The Walking Dead, which didn't even really go over that well, and people are already comparing you to The Walking Dead because you're a sister show, and you're gonna invite those comparisons even more by having your second season's major plot revolve around the season 2 major plot of The Walking Dead. You even have these moments that are just like clear, like things from season 2 happening in season 1, a bit different though, like Nick going out and getting that one guy who died, right, and bringing him back as a zombie to Not Herschel, and the sort of response there. is very similar to when Herschel has Rick come out with him to capture the walkers and bring them back to the barn. It's the same exact sort of thing, you know. It even ends the barn. The whole thing sort of ends in the same way too, and also has the same revelation with the walkers in the barn, except this time they're in a cellar, you know, type of like place. And the whole thing is like it ends with all of our characters sort of being split off in different ways. You know, like Travis went after Nick. I mean, I went after Chris. Nick decides to go out on his own. Daniel's daughter ends up betraying them and like driving off with the car soon after. You know, so like they all get split up by this giant like overrun like farm overrun with walkers, and our protagonists all get split up and go in random sort of directions to meet up again later. um and it even has the same visual of like the place burning down, like Herschel's like barn, um so right off the bat it invites a lot of comparison to The Walking Dead, while not being nearly as good as The Walking Dead, and while blatantly stealing ideas and plot points from The Walking Dead and not doing them as well. You know, think about the reveal, right, to everybody that there are walkers there, versus like the reveal of Sophia being in the barn and how much of a gut punch that was. You know, like it's not even comparable. Everyone's response, you know, I don't know. This just wasn't as good. Like some people like to say that it's because there's not a lot of zombies. No, you can make something be really interesting with having very few. So no, even not like having zero walkers, you can still have it be good. It just requires you to write your characters well and have your actors act them well. But the problem is, and I hate blaming the actors. I don't want to blame the actors because it's like they're not given anything. They're not given anything to begin with. I mean, I still think Chris's actor is just bad, because he always has the same exact facial expression on 100% of the time. And then he abandons Travis to go off with these two guys, right? And it's like, do any of you even remember who these two guys are? Do any of you remember the names of like any of the side characters from this season? Like think back to Dave and Tony in the bar. They're very similar to Dave and Tony, these two guys, right? Like in terms of like their group dynamic, right? Because Dave and Tony's group end up leaving Randall behind, for dead, the same way that these guys sort of do to like Chris and their other companion, although they straight up kill him. You know, the the fact that I remember Dave and Tony's names when they had like a tenth of the amount of screen time as these two characters, and I cannot for my life recall the name of these two guys, should really, really tell you something about them and about how poorly written they are and about how much of a reason they really gave us to care. Dave and Tony were well acted. They were interesting. There was a bit of a mystery about them. They were kind of funny. They were kind of fucked up though as well. Taking a piss in the bar. Um, you know, and like and Nate leaving behind Randall. Like I remember Nate. I remember Nate's name, and I don't remember any of these guys' names. Like Nate, I don't think we ever actually got a clear view of Nate. I think they mentioned his name like one time, very quickly. When they're having Randall jump down to get back in the pickup or whatever, and his leg gets caught in the spike, and they just abandon him. Like, that's who Nate is. That's the guy. And I remember all the speculation. Everyone was so interested to see Nate come back, And everyone was like, oh, they're going to be a part of, like Woodbury, They're going to be part of the governor's group. It's all going to tie back in, you know? Um, Except it didn't. But the fact that I remember Nate, and I do not remember any of the side characters from this. I don't remember the names of the two kids and their like family thing that they had going on. I honestly forgot that happened until just now. I don't remember any of the people from the hotel. I almost said hospital. I think one of their names was Oscar. I think one of their names was Oscar. Don't quote me on it. I do not actually know. I don't remember Not Herschel's name. I don't remember Strand's lover's name. I think it was Thomas. I know his last name is like the name of the boat, but I don't remember the name of the boat. You know, I liked in season 2 that everything sort of ended quickly and they kept moving on. Because none of the characters that they introduced were at all interesting. And none of our main cast were interesting, really, other than like Daniel and Strand. And then like Nick ends up at that other place. Like it really kicks up towards the end, right? Because Nick ends up at I forget the name of the place, but it was pretty interesting. That place was pretty interesting. I liked it. I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. You know. Um, I like the whole idea of them worshiping this guy that they thought got bit, who really didn't, and he was sort of using it as the leader there, thinking he knew best, and the question of whether this is right or wrong, of whether or not he's actually helping these people, and I like that he wasn't presented as a villain, even though he was doing kind of a villainous act. And this is really the moment where I kind of start to care about Nick. And I care about Luciana and this other character because of it. Like I hate that I can't remember the guy's name. I really hate that because this character's actually pretty good. He's not like great, but like it took them to the last few episodes to introduce characters that I liked. Or to make some of the characters actually likable. But by the end of the season, I feel like Strand and Nick are likable because Daniel just becomes completely unlikable by the end of this season. To the point I was kind of glad that when I thought he was dead and that he wasn't coming back because he started seeing hallucinations. Oh, like his wife and stuff. And I'm sorry, but like every single solitary hallucination in The Walking Dead, except for one of them, has been absolute trash, and they need to stop doing it. They really, really, really need to stop doing this. There's only one time it worked, and that was in the season finale of season 8. I I think his name is Jared, was it? I'm not 100% sure. The savior who killed Benjamin, that guy with the long hair, Morgan kills him by holding him against the bars or whatever to get the walkers to eat him so he couldn't get away. There's sort of a powerful moment with him seeing a ghost of that, with Morgan seeing a ghost of that guy, seeing a hallucination of him. But even that one wasn't great, and it's never worked. Think back to season 3 of The Walking Dead with white dress ghost Lori. Get out! Get out now, Tyrese! What the fuck were they thinking? Honestly. Seriously, I guess it kind of worked in the comic book when Rick was getting calls from people who were already dead, and it kind of worked a little bit in the show, but that was a bit different. When he's hearing things like that, fine. When you're seeing these ghosts and stuff, it just doesn't work for me. I think it's really bad. And Daniel took a nosedive because of it. But honestly, season 1 was so awful, and season 2, for the most part, it wasn't awful, it was just filled with tons of unmemorable side characters that nobody cared about. I don't even remember how most of these side stories even turned out. And Chris was just the most unlikable, obnoxious character in The Walking Dead history. Lizzie and Mika were less annoying than this character. Season 2, Lori and Carl were not this bad. He's just so... So to recap what's wrong with season 2, right? Season 1 was so bad that not a lot of people watched. All of the side characters were unmemorable. All the side stories, as much as I like that they ended shortly because they were all bad, none of them were long enough to be memorable, and none of them were long enough for me to grow to care about any of the characters introduced in them. While they managed to make Strand and Nick likable by the end of it, they took the best character from season 1, who is better than both of these characters combined. They took him and they completely destroyed his character in this season. He eventually gets better. We will talk about that next time in What's Wrong. No, sorry. I'm messing up my own outro here. The problem with season 3 of Fear the Walking Dead. It's me, signing out.